Hey YouTube, it's Dwayne here, and today we have another guest with us. That's right, we are continuing the discussion about the Textus Receptus. If you're taking a look at the marquee here, we have Dr. Mark Ward with us today, and we're going to continue the discussion about the Textus Receptus. Go ahead and say hello to everybody there, Dr. Ward.
Hello to everybody there, Dr. Ward.
Nice. I've been talking about the TR and the which TR question, probably seen the video, been talking to everybody about it. And so I want to get a fair perspective from both sides, one from the TR side, which TR, and then one from the critical text side, which TR. Obviously, you're not going to pick a TR, but just want to get your position on there. What do you think about that?
I have picked Erasmus's second TR edition as the perfect text. I'm just kidding, obviously. Maybe what you're asking me is what's the state of the debate from my opinion, sort of a roundup where we are. And I've been thinking about this. My observation would be, having listened to Dr. Riddle on your channel, and of course I've listened to and read stuff from him for several years now, and Dr. Van Kleeck, and those are the two, major figures on the pro-TR side, the people who have the most training and capacity in that world, and they are intelligent men. It sure seems to me, however, that we are in the talking past one another stage, and I'll kind of be even-handed here, maybe, and say that both sides tend to stick to saying what they like to say, and there is some failure to really listen. I like to try to show charity by pinning that on me before I pin it on someone else. All I can say is I don't think I failed to hear what they've said, but I will admit that where I still feel that my side has work to do, and where Van Kleeck especially, but also Riddle and others who are on that side, where they have a strength, is that they are attuned to the theological questions. I don't think they give the right answers, but I'd like to see my side do more work than Richard Brash has done and then Dirk Jonkind has done, although I think they've done good work on filling out, as Van Kleeck would say, dogmatic approach to the issue of preservation. We've tended to focus my side more on the evidence. This answer is too long already. I'll stop soon. But on the other side,
it's all right.
On the other side, however, I'd say I don't write a whole lot of scholarly articles. I'm a popularizer. When I do it every so often, I really put my heart into it and my time into it. And I wrote an article that came out now, coming up on 2 years ago, in the Detroit Baptist Seminary Journal, which pressed the which TR question on the Confessional Bibliology folks. And they have not produced an answer. That is, none of their accredited representatives, the people who have the training necessary to answer, they haven't answered publicly. Peter Van Kleeck did post something on his blog. It was very short. I found it to be wanting, and I think you were asking some of the same questions to him. I would just observe to people who are kind of on the fence, do you really think that the leading representatives of the confessional bibliology side have actually answered in any kind of satisfactory way the which TR question? And let me press that just a little bit further, then I'll stop. He wants to use Matthew 5:18. Peter Van Kleeck does. He was appealing to the use of that verse by older Protestant theologians, whom I also revere, Reformation-era theologians. And yet he wants to use it to defend a position where even he is acknowledging there are different Jots and Tittles out there,
right.
Different sets of Jots and Tittles. And as Peter Gurry pointed out, there's no manuscript of any size that perfectly matches Scrivener's Textus Receptus. If you're going to use the Matthew 5:18 promise, and it's so appealing to that side, I get it. I think it's the strongest passage they have. Then you've got to make it fit the actual world that God has given us, or it doesn't work. Apparently God wasn't making that promise. I'm asking people out there, has the other side answered the which TR question without doing gymnastics, and have they done it in such a way that makes good sense with Matthew 5:18? I think the answer is no.
And one thing I found interesting, like as we talk, I'm taking things in, but as I go and edit video, I take a lot more in when I'm doing that process of editing the video. It's like getting the interview, but just like in a much more intense way, right? So I'm catching things afterwards, and at that point I'm thinking, I should ask asked this, or I should have talked about that, or whatever it is. But in that spot of seeing this stuff closer, I've noticed that there's kind of a different approach between Dr. Riddle and Dr. Van Kleeck, right? Dr. Riddle takes the approach, the family of Textus Receptus editions represents the original text. I'll say the original text. I don't think he used that phrasing, but I think that's what we're both talking about. The way that it's presented, there's still the question of deciding readings, and deciding readings is textual criticism. I think his position puts him in a place where he acknowledges that there are, places in the text where there's some uncertainties, but he would say that there's far more, and it's true, there are far more in the critical text. Now, to kind of juxtapose that with Dr. Van Kleeck, he takes a slightly different route, suggesting that each edition that led up to the final edition was a more purified form of the Textus Receptus, which is different from Dr. Van Kleeck. So they arrive at the same answer. They just arrive there differently.
I guess I wouldn't necessarily say they have the same answer, because Riddle, it seems to me, and I've tried to listen, he has a Which TR blog post that actually predates, I think, my journal article. But I believe he said the same thing after my journal article came out, that he really just refuses to land. Like, he does use scriveners, but he recognizes, we do have to do some textual criticism among TR editions. Right. So he doesn't actually say with decided clarity, this is the perfect text, where Van Kleeck at least seems to me to come much closer to that, although acknowledging, at least implicitly, that maybe the text will be further sanctified. And of course, this is where Hickson and Gurian and I are all like, then why can't we say that the NA28 further sanctifies the text? And the best I could tell, his answer was, well, because it uses modernistic principles and it was produced by the Academy and not the Church.
When you say it that way, though, that the text is being sanctified, I think his argument is less about the text being sanctified and more the Church being sanctified. And as the Church gets more and more sanctified, better textual additions come along the line. I think that's his argument. Of course, that presents a bit of an issue because, at least in my mind, I wish I had asked him while I was talking to him there, is it seems to suggest that as you get holier, as the Church gets holier, their Bible gets better. Again, I don't know if that's a misrepresentation. I know Dr. Van Kleeck will probably watch this, and if you do, please feel free to correct me below. That sort of discussion point, it's wrong to suggest that somebody's more sanctified based on the Bible translation they're reading. That's not the measure. The measure of someone being more sanctified is by their fruit, right? Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long suffering, so on and so forth. Yeah, that doesn't sit well with me so much.
Yeah, I do definitely agree. And of course, you and I talked about this. We keep up something of a texting conversation in Facebook Messenger, and I appreciate interacting with you. I actually like it that you aren't quite where I'm at on these things, in part because I really want to model a graciousness in discussion among brothers who disagree on this. And I want to do the same thing with my, TR defending brothers, where I think that's become difficult. Not impossible, but difficult, is when those who defend the TR use Matthew 5:18 and end up using words to describe the Textus Receptus like pure, perfect, settled, stable, especially though pure and perfect, also preserved. What those words all seem to me to add up to say is we have every jot and tittle, none missing, none added, and all in the right order. And if you present that to a layperson, which is what they do, and say, our side is going to give you the perfect text. Of course, don't you want that? Their side is going to give you an uncertain text. That just heats up the level of the debate. If I can get people to acknowledge, and I think this is what is happening, the sort of drumbeat from my side, from Peter Gurry and I, Tim Berg and others, and now you're helping here, is which TR, which TR, which TR, which TR. And we're forcing them, I think, our brothers in Christ, to acknowledge, okay, it's not perfect, but it's way more perfect and way more pure than the one you've got. Well, take that to the lay people and see how they respond. I think they're going to say, wait a minute, the whole reason I bought into this is I'm an inerrantist. By the way, I'm an inerrantist too, so is Peter Gurry, so is Elijah Hickson. So Timberg, etc., etc. And I thought you were giving me the pure and perfect text that was from the pure and perfect stream, and the other side had unaccountably opted for the impure and corrupted stream. Now you're telling me that your stream is not perfect? But if we can get Van Kleeck and Riddle to acknowledge that, I think that's going to lower the temperature of the whole debate, because people are going to recognize, oh, okay, I don't really have as high a horse to sit on as I thought that I did. I have to do textual criticism too.
That's the acknowledgement here, is that both sides have a sort of inverse relationship to each other. And what I mean by that is, if you take TR advocacy, you'll note I'm using TR advocacy. I'm trying to be charitable to my
a neutral
TR
designation.
Brothers. Yeah. So the TR advocacy, they're very strong on the theological argument. So much so that Peter Van Kleeck has even done a philosophical argument. Whether you think that philosophical argument is strong, I'll leave that to the reader to determine. But, there's a lot of thinking that has gone into the position from that angle. And so their theological argument is pretty robust. But then the evidence doesn't necessarily match up. And so there's all these hoops to jump through in order to deal with passages like 1 John 5, 7, and 8. Though I will say Dr. Riddle has taken a lot of time to look at that. He's got some interesting stuff, but I don't know if I agree with his conclusion. And then other evidential stuff like the manuscripts in generally. In fact, it's almost to the point where the evidential stuff is rejected in favor of their theology. Now, if we flip over to the CT side, and again, I say this not adhering to either side, right? So I'm kind of like the middleman in the discussion, but not a
double-minded man, unstable in all his ways.
Yeah, sure. But then if you move over to the CT side, there's tons of evidential stuff to look at. In the words of Dan Wallace, he says, an embarrassment of riches. Now, I have a little axe to grind with that, but there is a lot of stuff. So the evidential side of the CT argument is very favorable. There's lots to go on. But the theological side needs a bit of work, and I think we touched on this a little bit before. What do we make of the theological side of the critical text argument? Why should we be moving into an NA 29th edition?
If I can keep my brain on track, which is not a guarantee, I'll have 3 points here. I'm a Baptist preacher, ordained, 3 points, okay?
There you go.
One is that I actually am satisfied with the current major answer of the critical text side when it comes to theology. My admission earlier that I think more work needs to be done is not an admission of failure, but of a necessity to deepen and fill out something I think is already true. I think Dirk Jonkind gave the right answer in his little introduction to the THGNT for Crossway, which I reviewed for the Logos Bible Software blog a couple years ago, when he said that the Jewish faith, they had a central location and central, religious figure, the high priest, and therefore they could have centralized control over their text. Now, even they didn't fully succeed in producing a perfectly pure text everywhere. We have these Catheve Curie readings, which I think are a massively unexplored aspect of this debate. My mind does run toward that evidence that I do feel that the TR/MT folks, of course, I believe in the Masoretic text too, don't adequately deal with. Anyway, I'm satisfied with saying the theological reason that we have variance is that whereas the Jewish faith was centralized and had an authority figure, the Christian faith was not centralized, was indeed told to go disciple all the nations, and was not given a pope. Pace, my Roman Catholic friends out there, we don't have a centralized person or place where, variance can be corrected against a standard. So I'm satisfied with that. Second point, I would say, you said the theology there on the TR side of TR advocacy is ironed out. I know what you mean, and I could say, they've spent a lot of time on that, but I would say there's some major wrinkles. Let me just mention a few. One is Psalm 12, 6 and 7. My side has repeatedly said that's not a contextually sensitive reading of the psalm. It doesn't accord with the grammar. That is, the promise is, thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Does the them refer back to the poor or the words? Well, in Hebrew, there's grammatical gender, and although it's not a universal, typically you're expecting the grammatical gender of the pronoun to match that of the antecedent. And in this case, you have to explain to me how the fact that the antecedent appears to be the poor, according to the grammatical gender, not the words, which is feminine. Them is masculine, and thou shalt keep them. Take that together with the contextual reading and the reception history, which is something I'd like to do more work on, but I'm wondering, I don't have any evidence for anybody in the history of the church who's come up with the same interpretation of Psalm 12. I think there are major weaknesses there. Matthew 5:18, I've already given this argument. Okay, if it's perfect, if you're going to use this to talk about textual preservation, every jot and tittle, you got to show me every jot and tittle. I'm still being told, well, we've got the every jot and tittle are all in the TR editions. And I made this argument in my paper. I'm like, brothers, that's exactly what the critical text side says. We just expand the allowable evidence pool. Why is it okay for you and not okay for us? And they'll say, well, you have way more variance. And I say, sure. But if Jesus is talking about perfect preservation, then there can be 0 variance. And once you find 1, Matthew 2:18, I want to say, some TRs say the wise men found baby Jesus, others say they saw him. That destroys the entire position if you're saying it's perfect. And if you're saying, well, it's not perfect, then you can't use Matthew 5:18.
Well, it's interesting with Matthew 5:18 because I've heard some TR advocates suggest that it doesn't matter because found, Evron, and saw, I forget what it is in Greek, is very similar. Yeah, there we go. Is essentially the same, and it means the same in the text. Like, how would you respond to something like that?
Then they're actually shifting over to my position, which is that preservation is God preserving the message and substantially preserving the wording. We don't have Bibles that say Jesus wasn't born of a virgin or Jesus wasn't actually resurrected, and some Bibles that say the opposite. They're all giving the same message. That's what the critical text side has said all along. What the TR side has said all along is we're going to give you all the words. We're going to give you every jot and tittle.
Right.
I like what Guri added too. Wouldn't that include the punctuation marks? And that matters, like in Ephesians chapter 1. What is perfect? So I made it through 2 points. Okay, I've got my third point here. You say their theology is ironed out. I'm questioning that. The third point is I hear and understand the evangelical conservative, which I am, the appeal that Van Kleeck and Riddle and others in the Confessional Bibliology camp make toward, we need to put the Bible in the hands of the church and not in the academy. I get that impulse. There are times when I want liberal scholars to get their grubby hands off my Bible. It's offensive to see what they write about it. There are times when they help me too, okay? I'm not denying that by God's common grace, liberal scholars have good things to say at times. So I understand where they're coming from on that, but they want to say, the church is fit to judge. And I'm saying, brothers, you gotta know Hebrew and Greek in order to make these judgments. And that's going to demand some kind of academy. You are graduates of the academy. Van Kleeck and Riddle are the lone that I'm aware of, legitimate PhDs, one from Liberty, one from University of, I forget where Riddle went to, somewhere in Virginia. Richmond? I can't remember. Anyway, this argument is going to necessarily ultimately take place among people who have the education necessary to have it, who can actually look at the evidence in Koine Greek. You don't have to go get a PhD to do that, but in general, sort of the exceptions even tend to prove the rule. They're the people who really put the time in to learn this stuff. It takes a long time, a lot of investment.
This is something initially when I was talking with Dr. Van Kleeck, I agreed with him because it sounded good. It sounded like it made sense to have the text in the hands of the church and all that. But I need time to digest and think about things. And as I thought about that, there's a couple things that kind of poked out in my own mind. One was the text of the TR is a product of the academic society, right? Erasmus was the University of Rotterdam, and he learned everything he did there. He went around in all different places and looked at manuscripts. It was kind of like a habit of his to collect manuscripts and to check them over and stuff. So in a sense, there's some textual criticism done there. You follow down the line, Stephanus, for example, the King James translators even, like these are all very learned and studied men. In Dr. Riddle's case, he suggested that, today's different. There's this postmodern philosophy, and so that's why we don't trust the academy today. But I'm not sure. I haven't had time to really think about that too much, but something like academia came from the church. essentially. So it would make sense that seeing academia as a ministry of the church altogether would be more congruent to that sort of thinking. And that, of course, that's not to say we trust everything that comes out of academia, right? We always, trust but verify. I think that's a famous president, I think, said that somewhere.
Sure.
I'm a Canadian, so I'm allowed to be ignorant on that kind of stuff.
But we trust God's word. God's word has authority over the academy. And so I'm a young earth creationist because I cannot in good conscience read Genesis 1 through 11 in any other way. I've tried.
That's right.
I'm not denying that there are true Christians, some of whom I respect greatly, like Vern Poitras, who read those passages differently. But in my conscience before the Lord, when Jesus asked me on that day, have you not read? I want to be able to say, yes, Lord, and I trusted you even against what all the educated, well, not all, but, a great majority of the educated scientists in our day think that I'm part of some, cult for believing this. But I'm going to stick with God's word. So I'm accustomed. I'm ready to do that. The question is, do these passages really say what the TR folks are saying that they say?
Right.
And about the academy and the church, you look at a Peter Gurry and a John Meade. Why did they start the Text and Canon Institute? Why are they spending Saturdays away from their wives and children? I guess I'm not even sure. Is John Meade married? I think he is. I know Peter Gurry is. One of his sons is named Westcott, ironically enough, or very purposely. Why are they doing these events? It's because they love and serve the church. Why are they doing their scholarship? I was just reading, this is going to seem a little random, but I assure you it's not. I was just reading Timothy S. Laniak's book, I think A Shepherd After My Own Heart. It's in the New Studies in Biblical Theology series. He is an academic, of course, and he's writing in a series that's run by D.A. Carson, and the whole first portion is all about biblical metaphor, and it is just gold. It was so helpful. I've done a lot of thinking about language in the Bible, and he was putting a bow on top of stuff, kind of crystallizing my thinking on stuff. It was so great. And then he's just done a ton of patient, careful homework in the Bible text to explain the theme of shepherd, to pull that out of the Bible text and let you look at it throughout the whole canon, and then shepherds in the church to pastors. And I just over and over again thought, thank you, brother. You've done a major service. I've read all these passages, 100 times, some of them 1,000 times. Psalm 23 is one. And he's legitimately, with the scholarly tools that he's been given by the academy, the Evangelical Academy, he's pulling out things that are edifying me. He's serving me. That is what's true Christian scholars do. To say we need the text in the hands of the church and not the academy, what does that say about Gurry? He's part of the church. He loves the church. He invests in the church. I love the church. I invest in the church. That is a false dichotomy, the academy versus the church.